Hey everyone, I am so excited to welcome Jack Thompson here today. Jack has a successful YouTube channel where he is helping people in their 50s and beyond move so they can live with less pain, more agility, resilience, and mobility. And the key to all of this is the fascia system, which is basically the connective tissue that is holding all of our organs, bones, muscles, blood vessels in place. So today we're diving into why the fascia system is so important, Jack's understanding of fascia's role in health span, longevity, feeling good, and basically we want to help you learn how to do more as you get older. So thank you, and let's dive into it, Jack.
I'm ready. Let's do it.
So, real quick, can you tell me why fascia? What got you into the idea of working with this part of our body that so few of us actually understand how it works?
You know, to explain that properly, I need to say where I first ran in and discovered this work. And when I was younger in my 20s, I was a college wrestler, and I my body got beat up, many injuries, that sort of thing. And I got into my 30s, early 40s, and I was really I felt weak, terrible mobility, everything was going backwards. And I would travel a lot for business. And I'd always go, I'd be in New York or LA or Houston, wherever it is. And I'd always be looking for some local guru, could be a chiropractor, an orthopedic, physical therapist, trainer. And I'd always be looking for somebody to, help me fix my body. And nothing would work. And then one time I was grappling, because I still was involved with martial arts as I got a little older and wrestling in a place in North Hollywood, and this real guy named Gokar, Armenian grappler, was telling me. I asked him, Gokar, you never get tired? And he says, it's because I know how to breathe. I know how to breathe while we train. He says, go check out Sistema. And I looked into it. It was a Russian martial art that, it focuses on four principles: breathing, posture, continuous movement, and relaxation. And you really dive into these things. They're not just principles that you kind of they're there and you don't pay attention to them. Systema training is all into those principles. So when I started doing that training, I started healing my body. And these injuries that were with me that nothing else would fix would all of a sudden start dissipate. They were getting less and less and going away, and I couldn't believe it. I was so excited. And then I had to dive in. What is happening to my body? Why is this working? Why nothing else would help? Like if I'd start working out like conventional weight training or that sort of thing, I would just re-injure myself. But for some reason, this training was making me heal my injuries, get stronger and more agile. I was starting to feel like a young athlete again. So being a fitness person, I've always been involved. I've always trained people and coached people. I dove into this and took like 7, 8 years of just deep dive and what's going on. Why is this systemic training doing this to my body? And I found out that it's because it's unlocking my body's elasticity. So many of us, as we get older, we're stuck in muscle tension. We always think we need a bigger sledgehammer when we need to move something heavy, and we end up just in contractile muscle tension, and the body ends up suffering, and it gets worse and worse as we get older. What this new training was doing to me was relaxing my muscle tension, and I was using my body's elasticity, which I call fascia strength, to power my movement. It's almost like I say it's like a rubber band. You take a rubber band, and if it's stretched at both ends, it's got elasticity in it. I'm
Mhm.
using that kind of strength to power my movement, my elasticity, like when you were a young kid, you had elasticity. Remember being like 10, 12 years old, you could get up and play all day and never be sore or anything. There was no consequence. But as you get older, that goes away. I believe as you were younger, your body's full of elasticity, it's just a better way to operate your body.
What I'm what I'm wondering is how does elasticity, so that ability to stretch, why does that mean strength? How does that make you strong if it's actually releasing tension? Isn't strength about tension and getting force behind things?
So when I tense my body, I kind of lock my body in tension. When I contract my muscles, let's say I'm going to lift something heavy and I shrug my shoulders, you see people struggle. They're
Yeah.
locked in their own tension. When I lift something heavy now, I do it differently. I internally stretch my fascia wetsuit. I'll explain that a little more later. And I create elasticity in my body. And sure, I still use my muscles to lift something heavy, but I do it in a relaxed way and I recruit my elasticity. I call it sometimes slingshot strength. If I take a slingshot and I pull this band back, there's all that kinetic energy in that band. I am using that elasticity through the internal organization of my body and the three principles I teach in my fascia strength and power program to use my elasticity, kind of like a second set of muscles, to help my muscles move my body. And the beautiful thing is when you bring that elasticity online, it gives your body a chance to heal because now the joints aren't taking such a pounding. The muscle isn't in all this excessive contractile properties. You end up using this springy strength. You start moving more like a spring than a brick, and it brings a holistic kind of just a body-wide healing element to any injuries you might have.
So okay, so I can't wait to get into the three principles you were talking about. But before we do that, why it, why does fascia hold elasticity? Like, what about, I think what I'm curious about is why the fascia system? Does that mean is that different than muscle? So is the strength not coming from our muscle, but it's coming from this other part of our body?
A lot of that can be debatable. Okay, and we're getting into
Ew,
something that
controversy.
there's some scientists that say no way, and then there's some that say that fascia has contractile properties similar to muscle. So in the last 15 years, fascia has become a buzzword in the fitness and the healing industries, wherein it's all releasing fascia. Let's say you got tightness somewhere, and you might roll on a foam roller, or go to get a deep massage where they're taking the adhesions in the fascia. And think of fascia as my fascia wetsuit, where this Spider-Man like uh, suit covers all the muscles and it is under the skin. Now it goes through the muscles and it's all over the body. But if you think of that visualization of it being like this wetsuit or this Spider-Man like suit that's that's full of elasticity. When I have slack in my system, there's no stretch of that elasticity. It's kind of like the rubber band here. It's got to be pulled by both ends to have elasticity. If I relax one end, there's slack. Now there's no strength in it. So that fascia wetsuit, how I organize my body dictates if I can um, use that fascia strength or not.
And so when you organize your body, that's your posture, as you learned prior. That's your breathing. That's these other elements we don't necessarily think about when we are thinking about strength and health, per se.
Your breathing dictates very much. If you're got restricted breath and you're always kind of in fight or flight and your breath stays high up in your chest, the fascia wetsuit kind of contracts and now you have slack in the system. And that's many people, especially as we get older.
So, Jack, how do people know if they're not breathing right?
The if you can't take a bigger breath, with not too much excessive effort down into your belly, and the whole waistline expands. I actually have that's part of my training called the power preload, where you take an inhale and the air goes all the way into your belly, and the waistline, not only in the front in your belly, but the sides and the back, if that expands too, that means your diaphragm is working properly. And if many people, their diaphragms are stuck. And when that diaphragm is stuck, now you're in this contracted state all the time. But if you inhale and the waistline expands just a little bit on every Inhale. Now the fascia wetsuit is creating this elasticity because if the waistline expands, it stretches the fascia wetsuit a little bit because it goes outwards.
Okay, I think I'm starting to see a little more. I've been we talked about it before. I've been following you for quite a while, and these ideas of elasticity are a really new concept for a lot of
Yeah.
people to wrap their head around because
It is very difficult at
Mhm.
first, and I just keep trying to refine the message. And I wanted to complete the last thought. I was saying that today in exercise and some healing arts are doing fascia release, where we're taking those adhesions and releasing them with foam rolling, massage, you name it. What I do is a little different, where we learn to, instead of release the fascia, learn to activate it to create this elasticity. So the release work will help my work, but the release work doesn't mean you're going to be able to activate your fascia wetsuit to create fascia strength because that's dependent on you moving differently.
okay, coolness.
Yes.
So much to dive into. So, uh, fascia release, that that's for another day. Today, let's talk about the strength part. So,
Yep.
you're saying here it's how you move. It's fundamentally changing how you move. That
Yes.
people who get older, they've started to develop patterns for 30, 40, 50 years. These are movement patterns that are probably causing them slack, as you talk about it, right?
Yep.
What are
So,
some of the biggest culprits though? Like what's the wrong way to move, basically?
right. So typically, and that's where my three principles will come in. So people typically have one of two types of postures. Even if they're aligned correctly, where you see, look at their alignment, it's good. They either have too much tension in their posture, muscular tension holding themselves up, say like a military posture, or they just have a little bit of slack that creates this fluffiness in the body where we want a nice internal stretch of the fascia wetsuit where it's just like I'm internally just lengthening, making my body a little bit take up more space internally. And that's odd at first, but the training I do, it ends up teaching you that. Okay. So once I got that proper stretch on the fascia wetsuit, now I feel a little more buoyant when I walk. I have more bounce in my step because I've activated fascia elasticity. So that's principle one is stretch the fascia wetsuit in good alignment. But now, just because I have that good alignment and that little stretch inside my body, if I start moving from my hips and my shoulders like a robot, like most humans do, especially as we get older, my fascia, my elasticity will get blocked. It'll be a power leak. Because once I tense my shoulders or lock my hips, now I'm disconnected. My feet and my upper body aren't connected. So the second principle, again, first principle, stretch the fascia wetsuit in good alignment. Now, when I move, I don't move from my shoulders or my tight hips. I move from my center, center meaning waistline, even up in the sternum, more like a belly dancer or a salsa dancer, rather than from my tense hips and my tense shoulders. And when I move from center, that allows me to keep the stretch in the fascia wetsuit while I'm moving.
Okay. That's so moving from center. Okay, this is a perfect segue to dive into your three principles, but
Well, that was two. That was the second principle, move from center.
because the first one was about posture.
Was yep, it's spring-loaded posture where we stretch the fascia wetsuit in alignment. And then the third is springboard feet where we're activating our feet. Because if I got the first two correct, if I got a nice alignment with internal stretch and I'm moving from center, and I'm exaggerating so you can see moving from center, but when I walk and do all kinds of movements, I'm always kind of leading with my center to power, not from tension in my hips and my shoulders like most people move. Now my hips and shoulders still move. They're still being used. It's just less. My center is more of the engine of the movement. But if those two are, I have those down, but my feet are like dead in my shoes. Now my body isn't connected to the ground. And basically I'm walking around in casts. My feet aren't even a part of me actually. But in my training, the third principle, springboard feet, is we learn to strengthen the toes and the balls of the feet. And when you activate the balls of your feet, so every time you move, the feet are involved in the movement. Out of my hand, let's say I pick up a bag of groceries or pick up my grandson or anything like that. My feet are involved in that movement. They're not just sitting in my shoes like they're in casts hanging out. Because if I don't activate the feet with my upper body, with my good alignment, principle one, and stretch fascia wetsuit, and move from center, I will be disconnected. And what this does is gives you full body strength, where the whole body's elasticity is now involved. Without the feet, I'm disconnected, I'm leaking power, I have all my body's vulnerable and weak, basically.
It's also in the longevity space. The feet are also so important too because that's part of the root of your balance. So a lot of older folks tend to be more at risk of falls, and that could be a really big deal because it can lead to hip fracture and then eventually frailty. So is this idea of springboard feet, do you think that could also kind of help with balance and the ability to
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right on target here. Balance ends up being a big part of my system. And the balance training where we're doing like one-legged balance work, moving from center while on one leg, stretch fascia wetsuit, your balance gets really good. I call it cat-like balance, cat-like agility, where you start moving real smooth. You ever go to a gym and see someone doing one-legged balance and they're like white knuckling trying to stay on one foot, that kind of thing? I believe that's terrible training. I want to be able to stand on one foot and relax. Again, more like a belly dancer, be just completely, chilled out and be able to relax. Now, getting people there, and I have many clients that I see personally in their, 70s and above where we do this training, and they have the balance of people in their 30s, you know, because their feet get so strong and those feet grip. When we strengthen our toes and our balls of our feet, rather than heels, see, older people become heel dominant, and there's no elasticity in the heel. Meaning, if you walk and you heel strike, you're like a old car with bad shocks. Every bump is like a collision, and the body, takes a beating, and you have no elasticity. But as you do my training with the springboard feet work, the ball you start to be more balls of the feet and toes is where you're moving from. And that is like a cushion, and it creates like this. Now you have a nice set of shocks on this car. And now your elasticity from your feet powers the whole body.
it is that fundamentally then changing the way you walk? So instead of going boom, you go
Yep.
stride, stride, stride.
You won't walk like that. If you're a heel striker now and you strengthen the balls of your feet and your toes, you'll start to be like a midfoot striker in time. And I tell people, don't like try to walk different. Do the training and it'll just naturally change your walk a little bit. But
So,
we have, go ahead.
oh no, no, you go, you go.
We have so many people, they walk on their heels and they start to waddle as they get older. They walk like Frankenstein because they're starting to lose balance. And it's just that the balls, the feet, and the toes have fallen asleep over the years. Once we activate them, now they lock forward and they have more swagger in their walk, and they have elasticity in their every time they land on the ground. Because again, the heel doesn't have elasticity, but the ball of the foot and the toes create the elasticity all the way up the chain.
So a lot of what I'm hearing is that the key to strengthening the fascia system and the key to this whole body elasticity is that lack of tension when you're moving. And it's
Lack
that
of lack of excessive muscular tension. When we got too much muscular tension, more than we need, then our body cuts off its elasticity. It's almost like, putting a kink on a water hose. You kink the water hose, it doesn't flow out anymore. That's what you just did to your elasticity, your fascia strength, when you have excessive muscular tension. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And I'm wondering, in your experience, you've worked with many patients from younger folks who are D1 athletes to older folks who are in their 70s but have the balance of a 30-year-old. But what are some of the common traits and injuries you see people coming in with? And how does that tension manifest as certain conditions?
Yeah. So think of muscular tension excessive. A common one I'll give you that I think a lot of people can relate to is people hike their shoulders up into their ears when they're lifting something with their hands, whether it be if they're doing an bar curl or they're lifting a heavy box, they do this. That tension in the rhomboids and the scapula, the upper back, it disconnects the body. Right now, you can't have elasticity. You're stuck in that tension. And that over time creates, a bad pattern, movement pattern, and it starts to create, jarring on the joints. The tissues take a beating, and then we end up with injuries and excessive soreness. People that wake up sore quite a bit, it's, typically from they're walking around with too much excessive muscular tension. Can be in their hips, their low back, and they don't necessarily think they're walking around tense. Matter of fact, they might think they're walking around loose and almost slacky, like a wet noodle. So they wonder, how am I sore? Well, it's because every time you take a step, the body's taking a beating. It needs its elasticity to go ahead and absorb that shock from every time your foot lands. Then if you start doing activities, let's say you play pickleball or you're a runner or whatever, now there's more impact. Every time you land, it ends up being like a mini car accident if your body's tight or has too much slack in it, and then that's why you wake up sore. So
I
we change how you move, the body starts to heal, you feel better, and you start to become more athletic. A lot of people surprise themselves during this process. They end up moving in a way that they feel, like if they were a younger athlete, that, boy, I'm feeling like I was, like I'm in my 20s again a little bit. And then some people that had never been athletic start to take on these traits, and it's a really fun. I love coaching people, and make they get these discoveries, and it really lights them up, because it's a lot of fun.
I think fun's an important word. I think a lot of
I agree.
times when people like in your experience, you said you tried all the gurus, you said you tried the chiropractor, you tried the acupuncture, all of this. I
Yep.
think a lot of people when you're in pain, it kind of drives everything, right? When you're in pain, you only want to feel better. And it does take a lot of joy out of life and the process because you're just focused on anything to feel better. And
Right.
so they
Right.
kind of lose that sense of fun even in daily activities, which I think actually I feel like psychologically that's a big deal too when we're trying to feel better in life. When you can't enjoy the things you want to enjoy anymore because of the pain, it can actually have a really big impact. So when you say fun and that feeling better can be fun, I just have to imagine that can have a lot of downstream effects, on what how you live your life, really, too.
Yeah. So it ends up being an emotional state if we're always not having fun and we're anxious and stressed. The body contracts inwards. The tissues actually contract with those negative emotional states. And that contraction ends up blocking your fascia strength. You now have less elasticity because of your emotional state, because you're withdrawn. But when you're having fun, or at least neutral and open and curious and all the fun states in life, now the body opens up, and now your fascia, the fascia wetsuit just goes into a little more stretch, and you have more elasticity, and now the body moves better when it's happy. So what you're saying with the happiness is probably bigger than I even think, because I've noticed that when I can like do a drill with somebody, let's say I'm working with them one-on-one and we make it fun, all of a sudden the progress kind of takes a big leap because of what you're saying.
I mean that's gotta be true. It's like the difference between feeling obliged to do something versus the difference between getting to do something. It's the mind-body connection seems real here. And I think I also talk about this because as you mentioned earlier in the conversation, fascia release is becoming kind of a buzzword, but that's also because people are using it in the trauma space. People are saying, hey, if we release tension from the body, wow, all of a sudden your mind is clear. All of a sudden it's like, whoa, I could
Yeah,
see, literally, I could see more clearly. And
right.
I think there's something about this feeling of the quiet strength and this feeling of um, elasticity, as you say, that's gotta have a huge impact on the way you go about the world, really.
Absolutely. I want to bring up a point about these other modalities, let's say chiropractic, physical therapy, could be anything, acupuncture, could be a surgery, could be a prescription drug. All these things that people, they try to intervene and stop the pain and feel better. I'm not putting those things down because they all have their place. What I've noticed is my work, training the body's elasticity, can take any one of them and it's like putting it on steroids. I feel like right now I'm working with a massage therapist, person that's very into their career and very successful, and he just loves my work because he's always thought something was missing. He'll do a work on someone and they'll leave the table, but they come back in 2 weeks.
Mm,
He's beyond needing customers, right? He wants to like someone come and he works with them once and they don't have to come back because he fixed them. But he understands that a massage in itself, just the release work, they get off their table and they might feel good for a day or two, but now they resort back to their old movement patterns and their
mm,
body ends up in the same state. So, what my work does is change the way you move using your body's elasticity rather than your tense muscle patterns. And now it complements the massage work. They like work hand in hand. Or a surgery. If you have a surgery, a rotator cuff surgery, and they fix the mechanical issue, but you still have that tension pattern that caused the surgery probably from years ago of hiking your shoulders and not using your elasticity, you still have that poor movement pattern. That's why oftentimes you'll see someone have a surgery on this shoulder, next it's their hip, or this tension, it moves and it'll like attack this part of the body than that. Where if we use our body's elasticity, the forces that enter your body and the force you create is dissipated throughout the whole system. Now nothing takes such a beating, the joints and that sort of thing. You're almost like a human, you know, uh, pogo stick, or let's say you're like you just got this trampoline effect, a human trampoline where you absorb forces rather than hit them like a truck.
that is a fabulous picture, at least for me, that you just painted in my mind with the trampoline. That all of a sudden it helps me see it click because it all the forces in life, even the force of gravity. I mean, think about like posture. Gravity's pushing down on us
Absolutely.
24/7. So it's the idea that, from what I'm understanding, when your fascia system is strong, when this wetsuit in your body is strong, it's saying, hey, gravity, okay, you can push down on me, but I'm gonna bend, not break. And in fact, I'm gonna bounce back against
Voila.
you because I have this energy from basically the stretching effect actually creates that energy you were talking about that keeps me upright and feeling healthy and strong and not beat up by gravity.
Well said. Think, and we've heard these old sayings for years, like have more spring in your step. As you get older, you lose the spring in your step. right? This is the same thing. You want to get back to spring in your step, build fascia strength. Train my three principles. There's other ways to do this too. It isn't like I've made all this up. I just have my three principles that I train and help people to get there.
So
Go ahead.
are these principles based off of what you learned from the Russian martial arts system that you talked about earlier, Sistema?
Yeah, a good part of it, but I had to go to other places too. Everything from some Asian internal arts to uh, physical culture back in like the 1800s, where we had these strong men that would develop their diaphragms and get incredibly strong, and like ripping phone books apart and that kind of thing. How it was like beyond muscle strength, and all of them trained all like this deep breathing. And I was wondering, how does the breath make you so strong you can rip a telephone? How does that relate to grip? And I was, like really nose grinding, trying to figure this stuff out. And through deep breathing, they were stretching the fascia wetsuit through the diaphragm, creating more elasticity. So there's quite a few different sources where I learned this material that I put it together from. I certainly didn't make anything up. I just drew them from different places and put it into my own three principles to teach it more easily to people.
So when you think about practicing breathing and when where everyone who's going to watch this thinks about, all right, if breathing's the first step, man, if I could get strong from just breathing, how can they practice? What can they do right now to all of a sudden start to get more in touch with their breath and strengthen the diaphragm, which helps with the move from center piece of your system?
Yep. So one real simple thing you could start doing now is when you lie in bed, put your knees up, feet are still on the floor, the knees are up, or you could be on the couch, and just put your hands around your waist, the meaty part of your waist, where you can feel like kind of like your belly in the front, the sides, and your thumbs in the back by your kidney, and start breathing, inhaling, and get so you can feel the whole waistline expand into your hands. Your hands are on your waist to give your brain a landmark to activate your diaphragm. And many of you will have a hard time doing this. And it just, when I work with people, one of the first things I go to if they have injuries is to see how their diaphragm descends, contracts on inhale. And a lot of times they can maybe get a little bit in the front of their belly, they'll get expansion on the inhale, but their sides and back are shut down. So once we get the sides and back activated through just inhaling, and I coach them through it, the brain finds those muscles. And now the diaphragm starts dropping correctly. And this is an internal muscle, and it's vastly important. I felt many people with back injuries that everything else was escaping them. They'd try to get fixed, kind of like my situation. Nothing would help, but just strengthening the diaphragm ends up fixing this 20-year-old back issue. Okay, because the diaphragm is so important. There's uh, developmentally when we were whatever the age is, 6 to 8 months, where babies lie on their back and they just belly breathe. Their feet are up in the air and they're developing their diaphragm. It's an internal muscle. Their primary muscles, the muscles you see like when you flex your muscles, those are muscles that the baby develops when it gets older. Well, the baby doesn't even have those muscles. So the development of the inhale and developing the diaphragm from descending lower gives them the strength to actually roll over. Otherwise, that if that development didn't happen from the diaphragm, that the baby would have a developmental issue going forward. So this work is hardwired into us from a baby. So as you get older and you've lost connection with your diaphragm, like you did when you were a baby, basically, and you get it back, magical things can happen to people because it's bringing this software back online to now power the body differently. And there's a lot of, I never make promises, but I've seen the diaphragm work fix everything from knees, shoulders. It's weird. Okay, you wouldn't think, when I think back issues or hip, I think diaphragm or maybe mid back, but it's in the center of your body, your waistline, and that diaphragm. If it's stuck and not contracting, it can influence everything downstream to your lower body and everything up.
So why do we lose connection with our body as we get older? If we knew it, what happened? You know, what in life? We all live such different lives, yet 84% of people in their lives will experience back pain. Even though we're all living so different, why is this still happening to everyone? And why are we feeling that disconnect if it's so ingrained in us since we're a little baby?
Right. That's a loaded question, and it'd probably be like a 2 hour, and I don't know everything, and there we would
Oh,
forget things, but just our society. I mean, it's a tough place to honor the human design and live today. Everything from strapping on shoes when we're little and living your life in shoes where we're disconnected from where our feet get this bad connection to the ground to now we have technology. Of course, people are walking around, with their heads down and that you look at that part of life, but even athletes, you think would be the young athletes going up into college, we end up uh, redlining the body through too much contraction, too much pressure to perform, that sort of thing. And all these stresses put a beating on the body. So I find that people in their 50s and 60s, the old athletes and the people that were couch potatoes their whole life end up with the same kind of problems where they got the same postural issues, forward head, forward shoulders, tension throughout the body. Their lives were different, but they a lot of times end up in the same spot. And it's interesting when I see that. And all I ever do is just honor the design. I call it honoring the human design of basically finding your body's elasticity so you have that spring in your step.
so when people come and work with you and you are just an expert in fascia strength, especially when it comes to people who are 50 and older, that's a pivotal point in people's lives where all of a sudden our biology's like, hey, okay, let's start aging because new studies have shown that piece. Can you can you explain to me a little bit about what people come in thinking this work is, and then when they do it, what they end up experiencing and what they end up feeling and how their lives improve after working on the fascia system?
Ideally, when someone works with me, we'll get some real big discoveries right away. And the body will start releasing tensions. The posture will start to be more aligned. The principles I just said, they'll start moving from center just a little bit. They don't quite get it yet. It takes a little bit because these concepts are very foreign. Okay. And we're trying to work against these bad patterns of stiff shoulders and stiff hips and moving like a robot, not a cat. Right. But typically I see some real quick gains with people. And then it'll slow down a little bit. And then the gains are just kind of perpetual, meaning I can always find a new layer of relaxation. And if I can find a new layer of relaxation, I can stretch the fascias a little bit more because it's my muscle tension that prevents me from stretching the fascia wetsuit a little more. So if I'm an older person and let's say I'm 60 and I go hit the weight room and I want to get in shape doing that, the body tends to struggle with that through tension. It's just more tension. The muscles don't like tension. Injuries happen, that sort of thing. Some people are outliers and they can get away with it, and I respect that. But a lot of us, that doesn't work very well. So more muscle tension as we get older to fix our body ends up kind of stinging you in the butt. Where if I can learn to relax and stretch the fascia wetsuit, I can keep getting stronger and stronger and stronger because I can always find another layer of relaxation and the body appreciates it. But if I put another layer of tension to the body doesn't like it as I get older.
Can I ask a devil's advocate question?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
In longevity, strength training is a pillar of aging well and living a really long life. study
Yep.
after study shows resistance training, strength training, weight training is one of the big secrets to a long life. So, the idea of doing weight training is putting tension on the muscles and breaking them down. So, is there are you anti-strength training, or is there a world in which we could do we could strengthen the fascia system, but also continue to give muscles tension because these studies of weight training show that it's correlated with a longer life?
So when I say fascia strength, it's muscle strength too. You can't separate the two. They're like dance
Okay.
partners. If somebody I work with picks up a bar, let's say, and does like a curl, and they hold it halfway, it's probably going to be 90% muscle tension holding that up. They'll still be using a little elasticity in their body, otherwise, it wouldn't even stand up probably. But it's going to be 90% tension. Where I get them is where they end up being 50%, let's say, elasticity, 50% muscle tension. Now they can hold that same bar and they're not locked in tension and they could actually move around a little bit. So now they're recruiting the elasticity to complement the muscle. But to go a little further, what you just said, so you said studies show and all this sort of thing that muscle strength, means so much as we get older
Hmm.
because we deteriorate, right?
Hmm.
So a doctor tells someone muscle strength is important. Go lift weights.
Hmm.
But that would be like me saying staying hydrated is good. No one's going to argue that. But you might go home and be drinking from a mud puddle that's contaminated with toxins, right? Does that mean you should be drinking from that? No. Right? It just make you sicker. So when people go take that advice, I got to get stronger, and they go to the weight room and they're lifting weights, they're loading themselves on a terrible posture that's got too much tension or too much slack. That weight training isn't good for that person. It's almost like it's an injury, a train wreck waiting to happen. So when the body learns how to use its elasticity and get in alignment, like when as a younger person does, just naturally, and then lifts weights, now that older person has their elasticity there to protect the joints as they get their muscle strength and get stronger and stronger. So what ends up happening, my fascia strength work ends up helping people trying to build more muscle because they don't get injured because now they have the elasticity to protect their body as their muscles get stronger.
Okay, I think I understand what you are saying, and it's it. I'm wondering though, when people okay, so I follow your videos sometimes and I do the fascia hopping. Okay, bounce, bounce, bounce. Yay! You know what? We're getting springboard feet, move from center. But okay, so I'm doing the right thing, right? Because if I'm training my fascia, why does my back hurt when I do it? Am I like if it's something that's going to strengthen the elasticity and help me prevent injuries, why does it actually hurt me? And
Yep.
I I don't, yeah, I'll just let you speak.
So look at movement as two things. The body's either absorbing force or creating force. So every time you hop, when you land, the body has to absorb that force of your body weight, correct?
Hmm.
And then right afterwards, you have to create the force to bounce back up. Whenever you put too much load or too much stress on your body where it exceeds your ability to either absorb or create that force, it can create pain or problems. So when you say it might hurt your back a little bit,
Hmm.
I would tell you right away, without even watching you, don't hop off the ground. In those videos where I teach fascia hopping, I see start with bouncing where your feet don't leave the ground. So now you're not absorbing as much force when you land. Because if you're not ready for that, yeah, you might tweak your back or that sort of thing. So the training is always very progressive where we find the place where it isn't too much. Because if you can't absorb or create that force, there's a consequence possibly for that. So we find that comfort level where you can succeed and build your elasticity. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I'm wondering, so for myself and other people who may suffer from back pain or knee pain or whatever type of inhibition they have in their body, whatever limitation, are there other types of exercise or other things that are also supporting the fascia system? Like, does yoga help? Does golfing help? Does pickleball? I don't know. Like, are there other things that help support developing that more?
All movement, you know, to me, is kind of the same thing. If I can internally stretch the fascia wetsuit, move from center and activate my feet, my body is in the greatest place to absorb more force and create better forces. And it doesn't matter if it's, dancing, it doesn't matter if it's weight training, it doesn't matter if it's wrestling or Tai Chi, the body, or throwing something. All these principles are universal. So when you say yoga, yoga is often, I believe where the origin is stretching the fascia wetsuit in those postures, but it gets watered down. And if you're in a yoga class with an instructor that isn't telling you to relax the muscles and internally stretch while you're in those postures, you might jack your back or hurt your shoulder or whatever, because now you're just trying to go into this difficult pose with excessive muscle tension and you end up hurting yourself. So it's not so much the modality, the art, whatever, Pilates, yoga, whatever. It's how are you internally organizing your body while you do those things. So that successful YouTube video you talked about, fascia hopping, got a bunch of views. And I look at comments and I try to reply to all comments. The biggest question there, can I just use a rebounder instead? A little mini trampoline to bounce. And my answer is always the same. It isn't the tool you're working on or what you're doing. It's how you internally organize your body as you're hopping. Meaning if you use the rebounder, but you're hopping on it, but you're hopping a little bit too much on your heels in poor posture, the rebounder to me is useless.
Mm.
But if you organize correctly, hop on the balls of your feet and your toes are activated, rebounder, floor, they all have special benefit. See what I mean?
I do. And I think that's really nice because it's not limiting to one type of movement. It's going back to what we were talking about earlier, which is you're finding the movements you find most fun, but reorienting yourself in a way where those movements that bring you joy also bring you health.
Yes. One of the reasons I love this system is because I learn about other people's, modalities they like. And it doesn't matter what it is, I can interject my three principles and help them get a little better. And I have interests, in all kinds of things. I, work with hockey players, things I didn't have interest in before. And I always find it fascinating because I love movement. And so what you're saying is, you know, I love people have their interests and that'll keep them moving more because it gets back to that fun element, and a big piece of what I forgot to bring into the principles I want to say right now is in during all my exercises, when we apply these principles, we try to find a rhythm in the movement. And that's hard for people at first, but like dancing has all this benefit to people because there's a natural rhythm in it. And whenever you find a rhythm in the movement, the muscles naturally relax. Because if you're that shy kid like I was in 11th grade at the dance, you don't want to dance because you're stiff. You have no rhythm because you're like, you know, embarrassed to go dance with the girl. You're stiff as a board. But if you're relaxed, right, now the muscles relax, the fascia strength can take over, and you got rhythm as you move. So I'll often do training with people where we have a load, let's say a couple dumbbells, and we're doing kind of like this weird curl movement, moving from center and almost making a dance, but it could be quite heavy dumbbells even if the person's strong enough, where now we're building fascia strength with rhythm. Still got the three principles going. I'm activating my feet, move from center, stretch the fascia wetsuit. Now we're building a stronger rubber band, a stronger fascia wetsuit, more elasticity.
And in a way, when you have more rhythm, you don't have to think so conscientiously about what you're doing, and it kind of makes you less stressed because if you're not thinking so much about what you have to do because you're just finding flow, I feel like that would also be beneficial for people who tend to overanalyze and want to get everything right. But that element is basically saying, hey, actually listen to your body and almost like a metronome, boom, 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 time it out, let's go, let's let some other element take over instead of the conscious brain.
Absolutely. And you get to the point where you can find you don't need music to find a rhythm. You just have an internal rhythm and you kind of move with it. And it doesn't need to be dance like. It could be just walking. There's a rhythm in everything, even in your breath, that you find. And the more in tune you get, so rhythm is just part of your day, like all day. The body naturally is less stressed. The elasticity is activated a little more, and you're just a happier person.
I like the sound of that one. That
Yeah,
I think most people like the sound of that one.
right. A lot of times I'll be a little stuck with a client and they're trying to figure out the movement. I can just see the tension in them and I'll just loosen them up, say, okay, find a rhythm with this first. Okay, they'll find a rhythm, then we'll go back to what they were working on. And now they like just get it. It's like the brain clears all the stress and now the brain can function more with more creativity and get things a little better.
Total body. It sounds total body. Brain, muscle, feet, breath, just the whole shebang.
Right.
Oh no, you go. You looked like you were going to say something.
Yeah, oftentimes I say that we have the three states, the mental, emotional, and physical state. We try to align them. We want openness in all of them. Stretch the fascia wetsuit, open the mind, open the vision. Don't have like, if you got like, like focus vision, the body naturally contracts. The mental state contracts. The emotional state contracts with maybe a little more stress. But once we put on our peripherals and the world's now open, the tissues, the physical tissues actually expand a little bit. And the emotions have a chance to go to neutral or feel happy. So yeah, those three elements combined, when I work with people, I'm always bringing all three together. If someone walks into, they're going to do a training session with me and I can see they're mentally stressed, I know I need to get them out of that mental, you know, block to make some physical gains. Because I don't think like exercise alone just fixes you mentally. It might. Some people say I feel so much better after I work out, but it's kind of like an adrenaline rush having a cup of coffee. It's kind of fake. But if you work in a way that you align with your mental, emotional, and physical state, it's not a cheap cup of coffee. It now restores the body, the exercise, kind of like taking a nap. It actually fixes the nervous system.
Oh my God. That's such a different perspective. That one. Oh, no, I want to be conscious of your time. Topic for another day.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
incredible. But if I could just to wind down here, if you could just in a neat little package. This is a lot of people's introduction to fascia. I mean, truly. So, if you could just recap why, for people who are aging especially, and for the aging body, why should we consider fascia as a pillar for better health, better aging, and a better life?
yeah. If, you know, everybody's different, but we all kind of have similar human bodies. And what I'm saying is there's a attribute in the body called elasticity that I call fascia strength. It was present when you were younger, and then it typically dwindles. And there you get the expression, as you get older, you lose that spring in your step. So I really, believe that fascia strength or elasticity is like this, I didn't make this up, but I believe it's like this hidden attribute that fitness trainers, exercise people, healers aren't really focused on. where if they did, a lot of people would get out of pain, get stronger, better performance if they're athletes, all these sort of things. And it's something new to people, and that's why I try to break it down into three principles. I keep trying to refine the messages. I've been doing this for years, and because it's so different than everything you hear out there, it's challenging. The brain needs to figure this out first. And what I always find is when people start feeling the difference, if I can get you to feel what I'm talking about, that's when it starts to make sense. So one way to do that, that doesn't cost anything, is just go to my YouTube channel and just start playing with some of the exercises, and see if and every time I teach, I go in detail on how to organize the body as you do the exercise. One of my biggest complaints on the comments on my YouTube videos is this guy just took a 30-second exercise and made it 9 minutes, you know, because they just want to play Simon Says and copy what I'm doing. But that's not what I do. I teach you how to internally organize your body as you're doing the exercise, and that takes 9 minutes for me to explain. So obviously that person doesn't have the attention span or curiosity or whatever, where you don't like me, that's fine, but you see what I'm saying. There's a whole, if there's one attribute you need to make my work helpful for you, is you need to have the ability to go inside your body and have the patience to do that. And if you don't have that already, you'll gain that through my work. But if you don't have that and you're not interested in having that, my work won't work for you, because you have to put your mind's eye inside your body to internally organize it differently.
And that's a big ask, which is why the people who do it probably all of a sudden start to see and recognize things about the way they move and have more awareness because you give it the attention and you're not wanting it in 30 seconds, which I think that's really funny actually because you see that so often. People are just like, get to the point,
Oh yeah, yeah.
YouTube's laden with that.
Oh yeah, we got the fruit fly attention span. And there
I like that. Fruit fly attention span.
yeah, like one of the exercises I teach is just the old regular jumping jack, that you did when you were a little kid. Everyone knows how to do it. And I made about a 10-minute video about it. So it's like,
Oh,
and again, I'm teaching all three principles and turn how to do it. And it changes everything, how you move your body. Where it once hurt, a lot of times I work with people, their shoulder mobility is bad. When they go to do a jumping jack, they can only go that high, especially older people, and it starts to hurt. But then we go through the three principles and teach the jumping jack and start doing it. By the end of the session, their arms are quite a bit higher. And we didn't do any stretching. We didn't do any of that. We didn't do any mobility work. All we did was added the three principles. Now the elasticity was stimulated, and now the body's elasticity is supporting the shoulders, and now their weak shoulders can actually work better and have more mobility.
oh man, I should share that. I know someone with frozen shoulder, so I should
Oh yeah,
probably share that there are other ways to approach it than trying
yeah.
to force a square peg in a round hole, if you will, by just making it move without the fascia principle part.
And always with that process, I tell people all the time, never move into pain. So if they're doing that jumping jack and their arms can only go that high until there's a little bit of pain, you only go that high. But then we work the principles, and next thing, a lot of times they go higher and higher, and it just happens. It evolves naturally rather than trying to get your shoulders into that pain. Now your body goes into fight or flight, and you have more muscular tension, and now the training session just went backwards.
So the things that could help start to hurt.
The things, say that again.
So the thing that could help, like the training, all of a sudden actually starts to hurt you instead of being helpful if you're forcing it when it's painful and you're trying to do this stuff when it's painful.
Happens all the time. Like you said, the person that thinks they should be lifting weights and they go lift weights on a terrible weak structure, their body is being beat up and they think they're doing the right thing because they're getting older and they're losing muscle mass, and all the science says, well, that's a very blanket thing to say. Again, it'd be like me saying you need to drink plenty of water, but you're drinking water from a mud puddle that's got toxins in it. that doesn't mean it's good to drink that water. So, it's like, how do you organize your body as you move? And if you get that down and you find the way that the human design was meant to be organized, now all your movement becomes better, stronger, more agile, and it has a healing effect on the body.
I think that's what everyone wants too. You know, that those words because they carry more weight than just the agility carries more weight than just the word. Agility means I can go more places. It means I can go on hikes. It means I
Yep.
can lift up the grandkids. It means I can go have adventures and do things that I thought I couldn't because my body was going to work against me because that's just what aging is, quote unquote. So
Right.
it carries a lot more weight than that.
Cat-like agility, I call it, is like a cornerstone of my work. I say never try to gain strength and suffer agility, meaning tense strength isn't worth it. If I want to add a load to my body, let's say I'm doing shoulder presses and I'm stiff as a board and I got my core tense like a plank, I don't do that kind of training. My training is we learn to relax under load. And now my body's agile and strong at the same time. That's the healing effect. And it just so happens to be a performance effect. The greatest athletes in the world, the ones that can be at that highest level and have long careers, they're strong and agile at the same time.
I think of pole vaulters because they're
Oh, yeah.
able to go and do the back bend over the bar, and yet, the fact that they have enough strength to pull themselves up from just putting a pole in the ground, I mean, that alone is just crazy. And then there's that second part where they're bending over it and going 18 feet in the air or something, which is just unbelievable.
Right, right. Then you look at like sports, like Tom Brady in football, great quarterback into his 40s. He's an outlier. I mean, that's just incredible to play that many years and not get banged up and sidelined into your 40s and win a Super Bowl. That Tom Brady is in my opinion, is a natural fascia strength person. He internally organizes his body in a way to use his elasticity. Otherwise, I don't think he'd ever be able to last that many years in the NFL and be so good. You know, think of I always look at people that I call them the fascia strength masters that didn't know they were fascia strength masters. You're a little too young for this, but Muhammad Ali, he
I
had
know
this
him. No, 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 I
right,
know him.
but you're too young to remember when he was big, and when he was on doing
Oh
interviews,
yeah.
it was something. And that's back when there was only a few channels, so it was like it had a lot of attention. But he had the slogan, float like a butterfly, sting like a bee.
Ooh.
And that's fascia
Ooh.
strength. He was relaxed out there, almost dancing, right? Agile, but then sting like a bee means boom. He had power and performance with that float like a butterfly. That's a fascia strength master.
That's that sounds like something Mr. Miyagi would say in Karate Kid because he told Daniel about one of the he used a similar animal reference I think because it's key in Asian martial arts is using animals as
Yeah.
your inspiration for how you should move with certain really quality performance attributes, you know?
Bruce Lee said he has a quote. I don't know it exactly, but it's basically, "Don't move like the oak tree because it gets stiff and breaks. Move like the willow. The willow tree bends with the wind, so it doesn't break because it has that cat-like agility inside its strength."
Ugh, too cool. Too cool. All right, Jack. Thank you. I want to be conscientious because I could talk about this for ages. But thank you so much for your time and joining us and introducing everyone to this idea of fascia strength that is really just so intriguing and a very open-minded approach to movement, I would say. It's much more open-minded than eight bicep curls. And so I think it's a really exciting way to explore what our bodies are capable of and also how it could potentially reduce pain and make you live better. These other things that we all care so much about as we get older and want to live a good life.
Yeah, it ends up being it can a nice maybe addition to your healthcare, where you're not just behind the eight ball, always trying to, um, you know, I just hurt this, I got to have it looked at, or this or that, where you get out ahead of things, very
Mhm.
preventable, and then fix the existing injuries you do have.
Perfect. Let's fix injuries. I could give you a list of 10 for me, but we will not go there. But thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure.
For me too. Thanks.